Dad made me lick the dirty floor of our house every time he found a tiny spot. A good wife needs to know how to use her mouth. Clean it. Now. For 2 years, I tasted wax and humiliation, until the day I prepared a lesson he would never forget. Hello, my dear ones. How wonderful to have you here with me once again. My name is Eliza May Thompson. I'm 84 years old with a life well lived, and I'm here in my cozy little house in Elmwood, Iowa, where I was born and put down roots. This morning, after having my hot coffee, such a delight, isn't it? I decided to sit here in my favorite armchair, the one my late husband Walter gave me as a wedding present 60 years ago, to talk with you. From where I'm sitting right now, I can see my red rose garden through the window. How beautiful! The morning sun is hitting them now, making everything golden. It's in these moments, caring for my little plants, watering each one with love, that I feel most at peace. You know why? Because I learned that everything in life can be transformed with patience and love. My granddaughter Emma, who's 12 years old, always comes to help me on weekends. She's such a sweetheart. She helps me pull weeds, water the plants, and always asks, "Grandma Eliza, why do you say plants understand us?" I explain to her that everything we care for with love responds, flourishes, becomes beautiful. It's a life lesson, isn't it? And you wonderful people who always follow my stories, I wanted to ask a special favor. If you enjoyed what you hear here, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to Grandparents' Tales, okay? It's very important for this grandma here to be able to keep talking with you. And turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our conversations. And tell me in the comments, from which town or city are you watching me? And what time of day did you find this video? In the morning with coffee, after lunch, or in the evening? I always read all the comments and get so emotional knowing where you're from and when you take time out of your day to listen to this old lady's stories. Tell me, will you? Let's create a chain of love that reaches every corner of America. You know, my children, today I want to share with you a very difficult story from my life. A story that for many years I kept to myself, but today I know I need to tell. It's about a very painful time in my youth when I still lived in my father's house, and I learned in a very cruel way what obedience and humiliation meant. You'll understand why today, when I care for my little plants with so much affection, when I see them grow free and beautiful in the sun, my heart fills with gratitude. Because it wasn't always like this in my life. There was a time when I didn't know freedom, didn't know what it was like to be treated with respect. But let me start from the beginning, so you can understand this whole story. My father's name was Gerald Thompson, a tall man with a trimmed mustache and always very well dressed. He worked as an accountant at a corn processing company here in Elmwood, and he thought he owned the truth. My mother, poor thing, was named Margaret, a petite woman with her hair always pulled back in a tight bun, and she lived on her tiptoes trying not to irritate my father. I had 2 siblings, Arnold, 3 years older than me, who was always Dad's favorite, and Dorothy, 2 years younger, who died of pneumonia when she was only 8 years old. Our house was on Main Street in Elmwood, a large wooden house with 2 floors and a very steep staircase in the middle. What struck me most about that house was the flooring. All wide oak planks, which my father insisted on keeping always waxed and shining like a mirror. We woke up every day at 5:30 in the morning. Mom would go to the kitchen to prepare coffee, and I had to make my bed, leaving the sheets perfectly smooth, without a single wrinkle. Then I'd go down for breakfast, milk with homemade bread and peach preserves that Mom made. My father always sat at the head of the table, in a suit and tie, even inside the house, reading the newspaper in silence. No one could make noise during his coffee time. After breakfast, Dorothy and I would go to school, a small wooden schoolhouse about 5 blocks from home. I really liked studying. I was one of the best students in the class. My teacher, Mrs. Henderson, always told Mom, "Eliza has a future, Mrs. Thompson. She's very intelligent." But Dad didn't like it much when people said that. He said that women who studied too much became uppity and that a girl's place was learning housework. Our games were simple. Dorothy and I made corn husk dolls, played house under the big oak tree in the backyard, and on rainy days we'd stay in our room making up stories. I loved telling stories to my little sister. She would listen wide-eyed to my tales about princesses and castles. But life at home had its rigid rules. My father was obsessed with cleanliness and order. Everything had to always be in the right place, without a speck of dust. He inspected the entire house every night when he came home from work. He'd run his finger over the furniture looking for dust, examine the floor inch by inch. If he found anything out of place, he'd yell at Mom in front of all of us. I remember once, I must have been about 10 years old, I dropped some breadcrumbs on the living room floor. Dad saw it and turned red with anger. "Margaret, teach this girl that a clean house is a decent house. A woman who can't keep a clean house is good for nothing." Mom was embarrassed, pulled me by the arm and said quietly, "Eliza, my dear, always clean up after yourself. Your father doesn't like dirt." The housekeeper's name was Mrs. Miller, a very kind, elderly black woman who took care of the heavy cleaning. She taught me to mop the floor, polish the furniture, wash clothes in the backyard wash tub. "Miss Eliza," she would say, "learn these chores well. It's important for a young lady to know." I liked Mrs. Miller because she was affectionate, unlike my father's cold manner. My brother Arnold was lucky to be a man. Dad never demanded from him what he demanded from me and Dorothy. Arnold could leave his muddy shoes at the entrance, could spill food on the floor, and Dad would say, "Leave it, men don't need to worry about these things." But if Mom or I made the slightest mess, he would be furious. When Dorothy died in 1952, I was about 11 years old. It was terrible. She got sick in winter with a cough that wouldn't go away. One day she was playing with me, the next she was burning with fever. Dad delayed calling the doctor because he said it was a girl's fussiness. By the time he finally called, it was too late. After we lost my little sister, the house became even quieter. Mom cried in secret, and I felt very alone. It was around that time that Dad started becoming even more demanding about the house's cleanliness. He said Dorothy's illness had been because of germs and dirt, that from that moment on, the house would have to be perfect, always. It was also after Dorothy's death that Mrs. Miller left. Dad said he didn't need a housekeeper anymore, that I was becoming a young lady, and had to learn to take care of a house like a real woman. I remember Mom tried to argue, "But Gerald, Eliza is still studying." He cut her off immediately. Too much studying isn't good for a girl. She needs to learn what really matters. So at 15, I was already responsible for part of the house cleaning. It started small, sweeping the yard, washing dishes, dusting furniture. But Dad always found fault in everything. "This floor isn't shining right, Eliza. There's dust on this baseboard here, girl." A future wife has to know how to do work properly. The way he talked about marriage gave me chills. He always said I had to learn early because otherwise no decent man would want me. Mom would stay quiet when he said these things, but I saw in her eyes a sadness I could never quite understand back then. It was a life of much work and little joy. But I still didn't know that the worst was yet to come. It was in March 1957, right after I turned 16, that my life changed completely. I remember it like it was today. It was a Monday morning. The sun was coming through the kitchen window while I was having my coffee with milk. Dad was more serious than normal, stirring the sugar in his coffee with that little silver spoon he treasured so much. "Eliza," he said, without raising his eyes from the cup, "I let Mrs. Miller go yesterday. Dismissed her for good." I felt my heart jump. Mrs. Miller still came twice a week to do the heavy cleaning since Dorothy died. "But Dad," I managed to say, "she does the general house cleaning." He raised his eyes to me with that cold look I knew well. "You're already a young lady. You're 16 years old. It's time to truly learn what it means to take care of a house. Starting today, you're responsible for keeping this house impeccable. And when I say impeccable, I mean impeccable." Mom was standing at the sink washing the breakfast dishes, but I saw her shoulders tense up. She didn't say a word, just kept scrubbing the same plate over and over. Arnold, who was finishing eating his bread with jam, gave a low chuckle. "Thank God I was born a man," he murmured, finding the situation funny. "And there's one more thing," Dad continued, getting up from the table and adjusting his tie. "A good wife needs to know that the house is a reflection of her. If the house is dirty, it's because the woman is worthless. If it's clean, it's because she has value." He walked over to where I was sitting and placed his heavy hand on my shoulder. "You're going to learn this properly, Eliza. My way." That first day, after Dad left for work and Arnold went to school, Mom explained the routine to me. "My daughter," she said in a tired voice I had never noticed before, "your father is very demanding. You'll have to sweep and mop the entire house every day. The floor has to always be waxed, without any marks. The bathrooms have to shine. And—" she paused, bit her lower lip. "If he finds anything wrong, you better fix it quickly." I started that very morning. I swept the whole house, mopped the floor, waxed the hallway and living room flooring. I cleaned both bathrooms until the tiles were shining. I dusted all the furniture, organized every object. When I finished, it was already noon and I was exhausted. That night, when Dad came home from work, he did his inspection. It was his sacred ritual. Every day after dinner, he would walk through the entire house with his hands behind his back, examining every corner. He'd run his finger over surfaces looking for dust, look at the floor looking for stains, check if objects were exactly where they should be. That first night, he found a mark on the kitchen floor, a small shoe mark that I hadn't even seen. "Eliza!" he shouted from the hallway. "Come here." My stomach froze. I went there and he pointed to the mark. "What is this?" "It must be a shoe mark, Dad. I didn't see it." "You didn't see it?" He bent down, ran his finger over the mark. "A future wife who doesn't see dirt on her own house's floor?" He looked at me with an expression I had never seen before, a mixture of contempt and something that scared me a lot. "You know what your grandmother, my mother, used to say, that a good wife needs to know how to use her mouth for more than talking nonsense." I didn't quite understand what he meant at that moment. He told me to get a cloth and soap and clean the mark properly. I knelt on the kitchen floor, scrubbing that little mark until it came out completely, while he stood behind me, watching. The following days were hard, but I thought I was managing. I'd wake up at 5 in the morning to start cleaning before everyone got up. I'd sweep, mop, wax, clean bathrooms. But Dad always found something wrong. A little stain here, a speck there, a piece of furniture that wasn't shining enough. It was on a Thursday 2 weeks later that the first real humiliation happened. I had cleaned the whole house, paid attention to every detail. But when Dad did his nightly inspection, he found some droplets on the upstairs bathroom floor. They must have dripped when Arnold took a shower, and I hadn't seen them. "Eliza, come here!" His shout echoed through the whole house. When I got to the bathroom, he was pointing to the droplets on the floor. "What is this here on the floor?" "They're water droplets, Dad. Must have dripped during the bath." "Water droplets?" He laughed, but it was a joyless laugh. "In a bathroom, droplets turn into mold. Mold turns into disease. Disease kills, just like it killed your sister." My heart squeezed when he mentioned Dorothy in such a cruel way. Then he said the phrase that never left my head. "A good wife needs to know how to use her mouth. Clean it, now." I didn't understand at first. "Clean it with what, Dad?" "With your mouth, girl. That way you won't forget again." And he pointed to the floor. I thought I had heard wrong. "What do you mean, Dad?" "Kneel down there and clean those droplets with your tongue. That way you'll learn to pay attention to the work you do." I felt the world spinning. I looked at him, hoping it was a cruel joke, but his face was more serious than ever. "Dad, I can't." "Yes, you can, and you will." He shouted so loud that Mom came running from the bedroom. "Gerald, what's happening?" "Your daughter doesn't know how to clean properly. She's learning now." Mom looked at me kneeling on the cold bathroom floor, looked at Dad, and lowered her head. "Eliza," she whispered. Obey your father. It was the first time I tasted the bitter flavor of humiliation. Kneeling on the cold bathroom floor, with Dad standing behind me, watching every movement, I licked those droplets from the floor until he said it was enough. The taste of soap mixed with dirty water stayed in my mouth the rest of the night. Lying in bed that night, I couldn't sleep. I cried quietly so Mom wouldn't hear, but inside a revolt was being born that I had never felt before. And that's when I began to understand that this was just the beginning of something much worse. After that first time in the bathroom, things got worse week after week. Dad had found a new way to control me, and it seemed like he enjoyed the power it gave him. The phrase, "a good wife needs to know how to use her mouth," became the nightmare of my life. No matter how hard I tried, he always found some dirt. A crumb under the kitchen table, a drop of water in the sink, a speck on the living room baseboard. Anything served as an excuse. And it always ended the same way. Clean it. Now. I remember an April morning, a Friday that forever marked my memory. I had waxed the hallway floor until it was shining like glass. I was proud of my work when Dad came home for lunch, something he rarely did. He walked down the hallway with his shoes dirty from the office dirt, leaving tracks on the freshly waxed floor. "Eliza!" he shouted, feigning surprise. "What is this dirt in my hallway?" My heart raced. "Dad, you just stepped with your dirty shoes. Are you contradicting me?" His eyes became dangerous. "Are you saying it's my fault?" I learned at that moment to never try to explain logic to him again. "No, Dad. Sorry." "Then clean it. The way you know you have to clean it." I knelt in the hallway while he stood there, watching. The taste of wax mixed with the dirt from his shoes was nauseating. But the worst wasn't the flavor. It was the humiliation of being there, on my knees, while he laughed softly and said, "This way you'll learn to do better work." The weeks passed and the torture intensified. If he found dust on the living room baseboard, I had to run my tongue over it until I cleaned everything. If he found a stain on the kitchen floor, the same ritual. Once, he found a speck behind the bathroom door, an impossible-to-see little spot, and made me clean even that corner with my mouth. The worst of all was that Mom knew what was happening. Sometimes she would stand at the door watching, with tears in her eyes, but never said a word. One night, after a particularly cruel humiliation in the kitchen, she came to my room. "My daughter," she whispered, sitting on the edge of my bed. "I know it's difficult, but you need to obey your father. That's how things work. When you get married, you'll understand." "But Mom," I cried, "this isn't normal. None of my friends' mothers do this to them." "Every family is different, Eliza. Your father wants you to be a good wife. It's for your own good." She stroked my hair. "And never tell anyone about this, you hear? It's family business." My brother Arnold knew too, but for him it was almost entertainment. Sometimes he would leave crumbs on the floor on purpose, just to see me being punished later. Once I heard him telling a friend, "My sister is kind of dumb. She can't clean the house right. My dad has to teach her in the most basic way possible." At school, I tried to act like nothing was happening, but I couldn't concentrate properly. My teacher, Mrs. Henderson, noticed something was wrong. "Eliza," she called me one day after class, "you've been very quiet. Is everything okay at home?" For a moment, I thought about telling everything. I opened my mouth to speak, but I remembered Mom's words. "Never tell anyone about this." I closed my mouth and lied. "Everything's fine, Mrs. Henderson. I'm just tired from housework." "Ah, yes. Your mother mentioned you're helping more at home now. That's good. It's important for a girl to be domestic." Even the teacher thought it was normal. I felt even more alone. The months of May and June were the worst. Dad was getting more and more creative with his humiliations. If he found a stain on the living room floor, it was no longer enough for me to clean just that spot. He made me run my tongue across the entire floor, board by board, until he decided it was sufficiently clean. A good wife takes care of the entire house, Not just a piece, he would say, sitting in his armchair, smoking a cigarette while I crawled across the floor. Once, on a Sunday afternoon, he spilled coffee on the kitchen floor on purpose. I saw him do it, but couldn't say anything. "Oops," he said, pretending it was an accident. "Eliza, there's coffee on the floor here." It was hot coffee. It burned my tongue, but I had to clean every drop while he watched, satisfied with my pain. I started having nightmares every night. I dreamed I was drowning in a sea of wax and dirt, that my mouth was stuck to the floor forever. I'd wake up with a bitter taste in my mouth, even though I hadn't cleaned anything. My body was starting to show signs that it couldn't take it anymore. My tongue was always injured and inflamed. My back hurt from being on the floor so much. My knees were bruised from kneeling so much on the hard floor. But the worst of all was what was happening to my soul. I was losing hope, losing the will to fight. I was starting to believe that this was really normal, that I deserved it, that this was just how things worked between fathers and daughters. One June night, after a particularly cruel humiliation in the bathroom, where he had made me clean the entire floor with my tongue because he found a water drop near the drain, I looked at myself in the mirror. I didn't recognize the girl staring back at me. My eyes were empty, my mouth was injured, and I looked 10 years older. It was that night that I started to feel something different being born inside me. It wasn't just sadness or fear anymore. It was anger, a deep anger burning slowly but growing every day. It was on a July morning, a cold Saturday in winter, that what changed everything forever happened. Dad had announced on Friday night that on Sunday he would receive important visitors from work. The company manager and his wife were coming to dinner at our house. "Eliza," he said, staring at me with those cold eyes, "tomorrow night this house is going to be perfect. I don't want even a speck of dust, not a mark on the floor, not a speck anywhere. You're going to spend all day cleaning, and then I'm going to inspect every inch. If I find anything wrong—" He didn't finish the sentence, but I knew exactly what it meant. I spent all Saturday cleaning like crazy. I swept, mopped, waxed, polished, scrubbed every corner of the house. My tongue was already hurting just thinking about the possibility of having to use it again. When night fell, I was exhausted, but the house was shining. On Sunday morning, I woke up early to take one last look at everything. That's when I saw that Arnold had left dried mud on the entrance rug. He had come home late the night before from a friend's house and didn't bother to wipe his feet. I ran to clean it before Dad woke up, but it was already too late. "Eliza!" His shout echoed through the whole house. "Come here now!" I ran down the stairs and found him standing at the entrance, pointing to the rug. There were still some mud marks that I hadn't been able to get out completely. "What is this here?" His voice was low, dangerous. "Dad, it was Arnold who—" "I don't care who it was!" He exploded. "The house is your responsibility. The visitors arrive at 6 o'clock and you left my house dirty." At that moment, something inside me broke. I looked at my brother, who was coming down the stairs laughing quietly, clearly satisfied with what he had caused. I looked at Mom, who was in the kitchen pretending she wasn't seeing anything. And I looked at Dad, with that expression of cruel pleasure on his face. "You know what you have to do," he said, pointing to the rug. "Clean it, now." That's when I had my first rebellion. "No," I said, quietly but firmly. The silence that followed was terrible. Dad stood still, looking at me as if he hadn't understood what I had said. "What did you say?" I said, "No, Dad. I won't clean the dirt that Arnold made." What happened next was the worst of all. Dad grabbed me by the arm so hard he left a mark, dragged me to the kitchen, and pushed me hard onto the floor. "You're going to learn to respect me." He turned on the faucet, filled a bucket with ice-cold water, and threw it on me. Then he grabbed the powdered soap and spread it on the wet floor. "Now you're going to clean this entire floor with your tongue, and you'll only stop when I say you can stop. It was December in Iowa, the cold was bone-chilling, and I was soaked on the cold kitchen floor. But the worst wasn't the cold. It was looking and seeing Mom standing at the door, crying, but doing nothing to help me. It was seeing Arnold laughing as if it were the funniest thing in the world. I spent almost an hour on that floor, shivering from cold, with the bitter taste of soap burning my already injured tongue, while Dad sat in a chair watching me. "A good wife needs to know how to obey," he would say, "and you're going to learn, even if it's by force." When he finally let me get up, I had a raw tongue and my whole body hurt. I went up to my room, locked myself in there, and cried like I had never cried in my life. But it wasn't just crying from sadness. It was crying from anger, from hatred, from a revolt that was consuming me inside. It was that afternoon, while I was in the bathroom trying to heal my tongue with warm water, that I had my first thought about revenge. I looked in the mirror and saw my face swollen from crying so much, my injured mouth, and thought, he can't keep doing this to me. There has to be a way to stop this situation. That night, during dinner with the visitors, I had to serve at the table pretending everything was normal. Dad was all smiles, talking about work, playing the role of an exemplary father. "My daughter Eliza is very domestic," he told the guests. "She knows how to take care of a house like few girls her age." I smiled and thanked him for the compliment, but inside I was boiling. I looked at him, all pompous at the head of the table, and swore to myself, this won't continue. Somehow, this is going to end. After the visitors left, Dad did his usual inspection. To my surprise, he didn't find anything wrong. I had cleaned everything so carefully that it really was perfect. But instead of praising me, he said, "See how you can do it right when you want to? You just have to apply the right method." Lying in bed that night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about his satisfied face when he humiliated me, Arnold's cruel laugh, Mom's omission, and I started planning. I knew where Dad kept the cleaning products, in the laundry room cabinet downstairs, liquid wax, wood oil, soap, everything there. And I knew he had the habit of doing his inspection always coming down the stairs from his bedroom upstairs. It was that early morning, alone in the dark, that the idea started to take shape in my mind. A terrible, dangerous idea, but one that made my heart race in a way I had never felt before. It wasn't fear anymore. It was anticipation. The next day, he announced that on Tuesday night he would bring another important guest to dinner. "And this time," he said, staring at me, "I want this house to be even more perfect than Sunday. You understand?" "Yes, Dad," I replied, lowering my head as I always did. But inside, I was smiling, because I already knew exactly what I was going to do. Tuesday arrived like a day of reckoning. I woke up before 5 in the morning, not because I had to clean, but because I couldn't sleep well for 3 nights. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the scene repeating in my head, Dad coming down those wooden stairs, confident and arrogant as always, not imagining what awaited him. During those sleepless nights, I had reviewed every detail of my plan hundreds of times, imagining every possibility, every failure that could go wrong. During breakfast, he was particularly demanding and pompous. He wore the most elegant clothes he had, navy blue suit, red silk tie, leather shoes that he polished himself every morning. "Eliza, today Mr. Reynolds is coming to dinner here with his wife. He's a very important man from the company, vice president of the branch in Des Moines, and I want this house to be impeccable. Did you understand me?" He tapped the little spoon in the cup as he spoke, making an annoying noise that always bothered me. "Yes, Dad," I replied, keeping my voice calm and respectful, but inside my heart was racing. "You can trust me." "I hope so. Because if anything goes wrong tonight, if he finds even a single speck in this house, if a single detail is out of place." He leaned over the table, bringing his face close to mine with that strong cigarette breath. "You're going to learn a lesson you'll never forget. And this time, it won't just be the kitchen floor. It'll be the whole house, room by room. until I consider that you've truly learned what it means to respect your father." His threat, instead of scaring me, gave me even more certainty that I was doing the right thing. This would be the last time he threatened me that way. "I understand perfectly, Dad. The house will be perfect. It better be. Because my reputation at the company depends entirely on the impression this visit will have of our family. If they see any sloppiness, any sign that I don't know how to educate my own daughter—" He didn't finish the sentence, but his look said everything. Mom was quiet as always, stirring her coffee in slow circles, avoiding looking at us. Arnold was eating his bread with jam, making noise on purpose, knowing that it irritated Dad, but that all his anger was directed at me at that moment. As soon as he left for work, 7 o'clock sharp as always, and Arnold went to school, I began executing my plan. First, I cleaned the entire house for real, with a care I had never shown before. I couldn't let anything go wrong because of real dirt or genuine negligence. I swept every corner, even under the heaviest furniture, mopped all the rooms twice, waxed the furniture until they were like mirrors, organized every object as if it were a display in an elegant store. Mom was genuinely impressed with my dedication. "Wow, Eliza, how meticulous. I've never seen you clean with such care. It almost seems like you're enjoying the work. Your father will be very proud when he sees how beautiful the house is." "I want everything to be perfect for the important visitors, Mom," I replied, scrubbing the living room table with precise circular movements. "Dad said it's a very special opportunity for him at the company." If she only knew I was preparing the most elaborate trap of my life. I prepared lunch with the same care: well-seasoned pot roast, green beans with bacon, mashed potatoes. I wanted Mom to be completely busy and satisfied, without energy or curiosity to suspect anything strange. I also put extra effort into dessert, making an apple pie that was the house specialty. After lunch, when she went to the backyard to hang the washed clothes on the line and take a look at the plants, the most crucial moment of my plan arrived. Around 2 in the afternoon, with my heart beating like it was going to jump out of my mouth, I went down to the laundry room. Each step on the wooden stairs echoed in the silent house, and I kept stopping to make sure Mom was still out there, humming softly while hanging the sheets on the line. I opened the cabinet where Dad kept the cleaning products with a small key that he thought only he knew where it was hidden behind the large can of powdered soap. But I had seen him get it many times, always making sure to check if anyone was looking before opening. There were the instruments of my revenge, organized as if they were trophies. The can of imported Carnauba liquid wax, which he had specially brought from Chicago because he said it was the best on the American market, superior even to European imports, and the bottle of oak oil, that thick, golden, and viscous oil that he used religiously once a month to nourish and protect the staircase wood, always talking about how that wood had cost a fortune and deserved to be treated like a rare jewel. I took both bottles with hands that trembled with anxiety and determination, and went up to the second floor, stopping at each step to listen for any sign that Mom was coming back inside the house. The staircase was really steep, 15 steps of solid oak wood, the same wood that Dad always bragged about having ordered directly from a sawmill in Wisconsin, paying a price that any sensible man would find absurd. The first 3 steps were strategic. They were where he always stepped with more force and arrogance when he came down to do his nightly inspections, where he made that intimidating noise of hard soles hitting the wood to announce his arrival and start the process of scaring me before even speaking to me. With trembling hands, but driven by an iron determination I had never felt before, I first opened the can of wax. It was a golden liquid wax, scented with Carnauba essence that I normally spread with soft cloths in circular movements and then polished until it was like a mirror. But this time, with calculated and precise movements, I poured a generous amount on the first 3 steps. The dry and porous wood absorbed part of the wax quickly, but a shiny and oily film remained on the surface. Next, I carefully opened the bottle of oak oil. It was a thick, viscous oil, slippery like wet soap, with that strong and characteristic smell of aged wood. Dad always said that this oil was the ancestral secret to keeping the staircase beautiful, durable, and with that special shine that impressed visitors. I poured an even more generous amount over the wax I had already applied, creating a treacherous mixture. The combination of the two products created a surface that looked completely normal, shiny and well-maintained as it always looked after my weekly cleanings, but that had the power to take down a bull on first contact. It was like an ice skating rink disguised as a domestic staircase. I spent more than an hour smoothing and spreading the mixture with my hands, distributing it evenly and invisibly, making sure it was homogeneous but deadly. I tested it discreetly with my bare toes. It slipped like oil spilled on a wet floor. Anyone looking from afar or even up close would think it was just the result of exemplary and careful cleaning. But I knew it was an ingenious and lethal trap. After finishing the preparation, I cleaned my hands carefully with kerosene to eliminate any smell of the products that could denounce me, put the bottles back in exactly the same positions where they were before, locked the cabinet, and hid the key again. I returned to the kitchen with a smile on my face that hadn't appeared in many months, and continued the preparations for dinner as if it were just another ordinary Tuesday. I helped Mom season the chicken with a special mixture of crushed garlic, coarse salt, and cumin that she had learned from her grandmother, peeled the potatoes one by one, leaving them all exactly the same size so they would look nice on the platter, set the dining room table with our best china, the one decorated with blue flowers that we only used when authorities or very important people from Elmwood Society came. At exactly 5:30, like a Swiss watch, Dad arrived home. He always came by the same route, wiping his feet on the entrance mat to remove street dust and going straight to the kitchen to do his preliminary inspection of the preparations and inevitably find something to criticize. "How is dinner coming along?" he asked, already executing his obsessive rituals, running his index finger over the kitchen table, looking for invisible dust, looking inside the pots as if he were a restaurant inspector, checking if the silverware was shining adequately. "Everything's just right, Dad. The house is cleaner than ever. The food is perfectly cooked. The table is already set with our best china." "And the floor? Did you wax it properly? Did you check all the corners?" "I waxed everything very carefully, Dad. The furniture, the entire hallway, and I paid special attention to the staircase. It's shining like a mirror, it's so well cared for." He nodded with an air of cautious approval. "Very good. I'm going to take a shower and change into my formal clothes. Then I'll do my complete general inspection before the visitors arrive, to be absolutely sure that everything is perfect and I won't be embarrassed in front of Mr. Reynolds." My stomach gave a cold turn. I hadn't foreseen the possibility of him doing an early inspection before dinner. If he discovered the prepared steps before the right moment, my whole plan would fall apart. "Dad," I said quickly, trying to keep my voice casual and natural, "don't you think it's better to wait to inspect after the visitors leave? That way you don't risk dirtying anything before they arrive, and they won't see you inspecting the house as if you didn't completely trust my work." He stopped in the middle of the kitchen, looked at me with that typical distrust that appeared whenever anyone suggested any change in his sacred routine. "Why are you suggesting this? Since when do you care about what visitors will think of our family dynamics?" "Because I was so meticulous with the cleaning today. I did everything with such care that I'm absolutely sure you'll be satisfied and proud. And I thought it would be more elegant, more sophisticated to do the inspection afterwards, calmly without rush, like truly distinguished families do." He considered for a longer moment, stroking his graying mustache as he always did when pondering some important decision. Then he nodded slowly. "Makes sense. It really would be more appropriate and would demonstrate more social class. I'll wait until after they leave and we can do the evaluation with proper tranquility." I breathed a sigh of relief, but discreetly, trying not to show the enormous relief I felt. Now it was just a matter of patiently waiting for the moment of truth. At exactly 6 o'clock, punctual as important people always are, Mr. Reynolds and Mrs. Reynolds arrived in an elegant car. They were a distinguished-looking couple. He in a dark suit of fine fabric, felt hat and cane with a silver handle, she in a navy blue dress of imported fabric and a hand-knitted wool cardigan. They effusively praised the house, the careful decoration, and especially the presentation and flavor of the food. Dad was absolutely radiant, inflated with pride like a peacock on display, shamelessly boasting about how he had educated with a firm hand his daughter to be an exemplary future housewife. "Eliza is very domestic and obedient," he repeated to the guests whenever I appeared to serve a dish. "She knows how to take care of a house like few girls her age can these days." I always say that a rigorous education at home, with constant discipline and a firm hand, makes all the difference in the formation of feminine character. I smiled graciously and thanked the compliments with small, respectful bows, exactly as he had taught me for years. But inside, I was obsessively counting every minute that passed, anxious for them to leave so the real fun of the night could begin. The dinner extended for almost 2 full hours. They talked at length about the company's expanding business, about President Eisenhower's progressive politics, about the impressive transformations that were happening in the country with post-war prosperity, about the growth opportunities that were opening up for visionary men like them. I remained in the kitchen meticulously washing every piece of china that was used, but paying careful attention to every word of the conversation, watching Dad show off as the great, prosperous, and respected patriarch of the family, the man who knew how to command his house with unquestionable authority. Finally, around 8:30, after many mutual compliments and promises of future social and business meetings, the visitors warmly said goodbye. Dad accompanied them to the car, all solicitous and ceremonious, promising they would meet at the company the following Monday to discuss in detail some very promising business opportunities. When he returned inside the house, I was finishing carefully putting away the clean and dry dishes in the kitchen cabinet. Mom had already retired to her room, exhausted after the long day of preparations and the tension of receiving such important visitors. Arnold was locked in his room, studying for a difficult math test he would have on Thursday. "Very good, Eliza," Dad said, taking off his formal jacket and loosening his silk tie, with that air of absolute superiority and personal satisfaction that he always demonstrated after impressing important people. "Now the moment of truth has arrived. I'm going to check if you really put care into the cleaning as you promised, or if you're going to have to learn a few more lessons about domestic responsibility." He started in the dining room, then moved to the kitchen, inspecting every corner with the obsessive meticulousness of a detective looking for evidence of a crime. He ran his fingers over the furniture looking for microscopic dust, looked under the tables checking if I had swept adequately, examined the corners of the walls where dirt normally accumulated, opened some drawers looking for signs of internal disorganization. To my growing satisfaction, and for the first time in my entire life, he couldn't find absolutely anything to criticize. Everything was impeccable, organized, shiny. He grumbled, clearly disappointed and almost frustrated at not having discovered any flaw he could use as an excuse for a new humiliation session. "I'm going to check the upstairs bedrooms and bathroom more carefully. Then I'll come down to give my final verdict on your performance." My heart started racing uncontrollably. Finally, the moment of final reckoning had arrived, the time for my perfect revenge. He went up the stairs with heavy and determined steps. He hadn't stepped on the trap yet because he was going up, not down. The sound of his footsteps on the upper floor lasted almost 25 long minutes, during which he obsessively inspected his room, Arnold's, the upstairs bathroom, desperately searching for some microscopic flaw he could use to punish and humiliate me once more. I stood at the bottom of the stairs, motionless as a statue, waiting and observing every sound that came from above. My breathing was accelerated, my hands were damp with sweat, but inside I felt a strange and deep calm, as if I had finally found my true place in the world and knew exactly what my destiny was. Finally, I heard the familiar and threatening sound of his heavy footsteps approaching the top of the staircase. He was coming. He was coming down to give me the verdict of the most complete inspection of his life as he did religiously every night for so many torturous months. I saw his dark shadow appear at the top of the stairs, outlined against the yellow light of the upstairs hallway. As always, like a sacred ritual of intimidation, he began to descend, stepping with exaggerated force, with all that characteristic arrogance, banging the soles of his shoes on the wood to make as much noise as possible and psychologically frighten me before even opening his mouth to speak. First step. His right foot slid slightly, almost imperceptibly, but he still managed to balance himself by holding onto the wooden handrail. I saw the expression of slight confusion pass over his face. Second step. Now he clearly realized that something was different, wrong. He tried to hold on better to the handrail with both hands, testing the next step more carefully, suspicious. Third step. That's when fate was finally fulfilled spectacularly. His foot slipped completely backward, as if there were no solid ground underneath, as if he had stepped on an invisible layer of pure ice. For a second that seemed to last an entire eternity, he was suspended in the air, completely unbalanced, his arms flailing desperately in the void, trying to grab onto something that could save him, his eyes wide with absolute surprise, terror, and total incomprehension. Then came the most satisfying fall I had ever witnessed in my life. He couldn't hold on, couldn't roll to protect himself. He simply fell face first, totally out of control, his face hitting with brutal force on the sharp edge of the fourth step, then bouncing to hit the fifth, then the sixth, in a terrible yet musical sequence of dry and definitive impacts against the solid wood. Each hit produced a horrible yet satisfying sound of bone breaking and flesh tearing. The sound of the fall was simultaneously terrible and the most beautiful music I had ever heard. A succession of dull, wet thuds, then another, until he reached the hallway floor with a final impact that made the whole house shake and several delicate objects fell from the shelves, shattering on the floor. Mom came running from the bedroom in her nightgown and slippers. Arnold came down stumbling still in pajamas, with a sleepy face. "My God in heaven! What was that terrible noise? Gerald!" Dad was stretched out on the waxed wooden floor, completely unconscious, his body in a strange and disjointed position, his face unrecognizably disfigured and covered with fresh blood that was starting to form a pool around his head. The mouth, that mouth that had humiliated me so many times, was completely destroyed. The front teeth had been ripped out and scattered across the floor by the brutal impact against the steps. The jaw was obviously broken and dislocated at an abnormal angle. The upper lip was deeply split from the mouth, almost reaching the base of the nose. "Call the doctor urgently!" Mom screamed desperately, kneeling beside him and trying uselessly to stop the abundant bleeding with the hem of her own nightgown. "Eliza, for God's sake, run get Dr. Patterson! Run! It could be very serious!" I ran out through the dark and silent streets of Elmwood, desperately knocking door to door until I managed to locate the doctor, but inside I was experiencing a deep, complete, and absolutely unprecedented satisfaction. While I ran through the cold night, with my heart beating with euphoria disguised as concern, I could only think with savage joy. Now you'll have all the time in the world to learn to use that destroyed mouth exclusively to stay quiet, dear Dad. The revenge had been executed with absolute perfection, and it tasted infinitely better than wax mixed with dirt and humiliation. After that night, my life changed completely. Dad spent 2 months in the hospital in Cedar Rapids. When he came back home, he couldn't speak properly anymore. His jaw was crooked, and he spoke slurred because of the teeth he lost. He could never again make those authoritarian shouts from before. Mom took command of the house, and I could finally breathe. I finished my studies, married at 20 to my dear Walter, who was a carpenter and treated me with all the affection in the world. We left Elmwood and went to live in Waterloo, where he had gotten a good job at a furniture factory. We had 3 beautiful children, Carol, Victor, and Teresa. I raised them with a lot of love, never raised my voice, never humiliated anyone. Walter helped me at home, shared the tasks with me. It was so different from what I had seen in my parents' house. In 1985, we returned to Elmwood. Walter wanted to retire here, close to family. We bought this little house where I live to this day, small but cozy. Dad had already died a few years earlier, from a stroke, ironically, without being able to speak a single word in his last days. Today, at 84 years old, I live a simple and happy life. I wake up every day at 6, have my coffee, take care of my garden. I have 7 grandchildren and 4 great-grandchildren who are the joy of my life. They come here every weekend, fill the house with laughter and mess. A good mess, from a happy family. My granddaughter Emma helps me with the flowers. Just yesterday she asked, "Grandma, why do you always say everything can change?" I explained to her that in life, the most difficult situations can have a turnaround when we least expect it. I make my goodies to sell at the farmer's market: sugar cookies, cinnamon rolls, butter biscuits. It's a little extra income, but mainly I like to see people happy eating what I make with love. When someone compliments, my heart warms. On Sundays, the whole family gathers here. Carol brings the barbecue, Victor takes care of the drinks, Teresa makes the salad. We all sit at the big table that Walter made before he died, talking, laughing, the grandchildren running around the yard. Sometimes I look out the window and see the children playing barefoot on the grass, making mud pies near the hose, and I think how good life can be when it's based on love and respect. Nobody yells here. Nobody humiliates anybody. I keep the house always tidy, but now for pleasure, not out of fear. When I wax the floor, I smile, remembering how I learned to transform that suffering into strength. Each movement of the buffer is a victory over the past. At night, before sleeping, I thank God for giving me courage that July night. I don't regret anything. Sometimes life teaches hard lessons, but when we learn them, we become stronger. My neighbors respect me a lot. I'm known as Mrs. Eliza, the grandma who always has a kind word and a tasty treat. When someone is going through difficulties, they come here for tea and to talk. I have a peaceful routine now. Monday I do laundry, Tuesday I shop in town, Wednesday is general cleaning day, Thursday I prepare sweets for the market, Friday I visit friends, Saturday I receive family, Sunday is church and family lunch. My health is good for my age. I have some arthritis problems, but nothing that prevents me from taking care of the house and garden. The doctor always says I'm well because I have peace of mind. I sleep well, dream about good things. I never had nightmares again like I had during Dad's time. My conscience is clear because I know I did what needed to be done to protect myself. This little house in Elmwood is my refuge. Here I am, respected, loved, valued. Nobody forces me to do anything against my will. I choose when to clean, how to clean, if I want to clean. Freedom has a sweet taste that compensates for all the past suffering. When I look back, I see that scared 16-year-old girl became a strong woman, loving mother, dear grandmother. Life taught me that there's always a way out, always a way to change our situation. Today, while I water my flowers and listen to the pleasant sound of grandchildren playing, I thank each day of this new life I built with my own hands. And so we come to the end of our conversation today, my dear ones. I hope you understood that sometimes in life we need to make difficult decisions to protect ourselves. I'm not telling this story to teach violence, but to show that there's always a way out, even when it seems there's no hope. That July night in 1957 taught me that patience has limits, and when we reach that limit, we need to act. I'm not saying it was right or wrong. I'm just telling you what happened to me, like a grandmother who lived through a lot and wants to share her experiences. You who are young, who are beginning life, remember, nobody has the right to humiliate you, to take your dignity, to make you feel less than you are. It doesn't matter if it's father, mother, husband, boss, respect is sacred. Of course, today there are other ways to solve these problems. There are psychologists, social workers, police who protect those who suffer violence. In my time, there was none of that. It was every person for themselves, and I chose to defend myself the only way I could think of. My life after that night was built on love and respect. My children grew up knowing they were loved, that they had value, that they deserved to be treated with affection. My grandchildren are learning this too. That's how I break the cycle. With love. Today, when I see a mother yelling at her child at the grocery store or a husband mistreating his wife on the street, my heart tightens. I think about the child or woman who is suffering, and whenever I can, I give a word of support, a smile, a gesture of affection. You know what I discovered after all these years? That revenge didn't bring happiness. It brought justice. Happiness I built afterwards, day by day, with better choices, healthy relationships, a lot of work to heal the wounds of the soul. My garden, which you see here through the window, is a symbol of my new life. Each flower I plant is a day of freedom. Each rose that blooms is a morning without fear. Each vegetable I harvest is the taste of independence. I care for them with affection because I finally learned what it means to care out of love, not obligation. For you who are going through difficult situations at home, at work, in marriage, don't give up. Seek help, talk to someone you trust. Don't keep everything to yourself like I did. Today, there are so many people prepared to help those who are suffering. And always remember, you are valuable. You deserve respect. You deserve love. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Life can change when we least expect it, but it usually changes for the better when we have the courage to take control of our own story. Here I end my story, my dear ones. Thank you for listening to me with patience and affection. You don't know how good it is for an 84-year-old grandma to be able to share her memories with people who care. If you enjoyed our conversation, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to Grandparents' Tales, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next stories. And comment below. Where are you watching from? What did you think of my story? Do you have any similar experience to share? I read all the comments and am very happy to hear from you. Sometimes I respond to some when I can work the computer well with the help of my granddaughter Emma. Next week I'm going to tell you about the day I met my late husband Walter, a much happier and more romantic story. It'll be a nice change of subject after today's heavy conversation. God bless you, my dear ones. May He protect and bless you always. And remember, life can always change for the better when we have faith and courage. A loving kiss from this grandma who already considers you part of the family. Until next week.